Welcome to the Therapy Show podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Mustard. In each episode, I interview a seasoned and knowledgeable talk therapist from the counseling world to glean valuable insights, techniques, and tools that you can apply to your practice and your life. And if you're considering a career in the counseling field or just want to hear about what it's like to be a talk therapist, then this is the podcast for you. Well, hey, friend, I hope you're having a great week. And when this episode comes out, it will actually be Saturday. So I hope you're able to do some fun things over the weekend. Our girls have a volleyball tournament, so that's our weekend. But we love it, and I'm so glad they have team sports in their lives. And speaking of team sports, I'm going to be interviewing one of their coaches soon on how team sports can shape and influence young girls and young women. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from her. And if you have any questions for our coach, feel free to message me or send me an email, which is lisa@lisamustard.com. But speaking of asking questions, I put a call out on Instagram in my stories for people to ask me questions, ask me anything on therapy. And so in today's Put It Into Practice episode, I'm going to be answering 2 of your questions. Now, moving forward, this opportunity to have your questions answered is always out there. So I think about once a week, you'll see in my Instagram stories the call for you to ask questions. So if you're not following me over on Instagram, be sure to do that. Just look for Lisa Mustard Podcaster and give me a follow. And you'll see in my stories, just kind of check in every now and then, and I'll put that up there. But you can always email me if you have questions, and I will ask your question anonymously. I won't say your name, so you don't have to worry about that. Okay. Question number 1 is, Lisa, I've never been to therapy, but think it's something I want to do. However, I'm a little nervous about the first session. Can you share what a first therapy session looks like? Yes. Okay. So during this session, the intake or assessment session, your therapist will ask you questions about your symptoms, your medical and mental health history, and any other relevant information. They're also going to ask you about your goals for therapy, what you want or hope to achieve, and how you would like to see things improve. And it's really important to be as open and honest as possible during this initial session, because the more information that you provide, the better your therapist will be able to understand your situation and develop a treatment plan that's tailored to your needs. So after that initial session or intake session, your therapist will likely recommend a treatment plan, which may include a specific type of therapy, such as cognitive behavioral therapy or talk therapy, and then also schedule out your future sessions. And it can be, the first session can definitely be a bit overwhelming. So it's really a good idea to be prepared by writing down any questions you may have and bringing any relevant documents with you. Of course, if your therapist takes insurance, bring that card. If you have medical records from a previous, visit with a doctor or a therapist, you can bring those. You don't necessarily have to bring those, but they can help. It's also really, 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 really important, like super important, to remember that therapy is a process. It takes time and effort. It's not like a one and done thing. You may not see immediate improvements, but with regular sessions and a willingness to work on yourself and honesty with yourself, you can work towards a better understanding of yourself and your thoughts, feelings, and emotions. A lot of the times people come to therapy and they've never been before, and their assumption is like, oh, I'll be fixed within a couple of sessions. I love when they use the word fix me. But they don't quite understand that therapy is a process, and it takes time and it takes effort, and sometimes it's going to be more uncomfortable before you feel better, and that's normal, and that's natural part of the being curious about yourself and allowing the process of therapy to happen. So take don't worry so much about, definitely you want to think about what outcome you want from therapy, but you want to be really invested in the process or the journey that you take with your therapist. I hope that makes sense. At least that's how I like to look at it, and that's how I kind of explain it when I have new clients. It's also really important to find a therapist that you feel comfortable with. And if you don't feel comfortable with that therapist, you can always talk to that therapist about that. Like, talk to the therapist about the fact that you're not comfortable, and that therapist can maybe help you find one that is a better fit. A good therapist isn't going to take that personally. A good therapist is going to recognize that it's not a good fit, and they're going to respect that you need somebody different, and they're going to help you in the process of finding somebody different that could be a better fit. I've had people do that in sessions with me, and I'm totally fine with that. And as a therapist, I have to know my limits and I have to know what is within my scope of practice too. So I had a call the other day, and the issue that the person wanted to work on just wasn't a good fit for me. It's not my area of expertise. And as much as I want to help that person, it wouldn't be good for me to bring that person on knowing that I'm probably not the best fit. So I recommended somebody as soon as I heard the person's issue. I said, you know what? I know somebody that would be a really good fit for you, and gave that person that therapist number. And that person is, I'm pretty sure, going to be working with that therapist. So we don't take it personally. I know what my areas of expertise are. I know where I can best help people, and I stay within that scope. And that's going to be a similar thing for you. If you go to therapy for the first time and it just doesn't feel like a good fit, that's okay. It's not always going to be a home run on your first try. If you are looking for a therapist and you're unsure about how to do that, I want you to go back and listen to episode 108, which is called How to Find a Therapist or Counselor. And I give some really good advice and tips on where you can find a therapist. That link to that episode is in the show notes. So thank you for question number one. I appreciate you asking. Okay, so let's move on to question number two. And someone asked me if I've ever been to therapy. So the answer is yes, is a heck yes. In fact, going to therapy in my 20s is what set me on the path to becoming a licensed marriage and family therapist. The very first time I went to therapy was due to a big breakup. It really shook me to my core. My boyfriend at the time, who is actually now my husband, he broke up with me and I was completely devastated. I mean, the guy I thought I would marry broke up with me, and it sent me into a depressive episode. But I already had the signs and symptoms of depression going on in my life. So this was just the icing on the cake. You could say that kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back for me. And I went to therapy at that point in my life because I wanted to understand like what the heck was going on with me. Why was I so unhappy and discontent? I really felt like something was wrong with me. And once I got into therapy, I began to unpack a ton of stuff. I won't go into all the details of all the stuff, but my therapist helped me process a lot of issues that I had that came from my childhood. And now I'm not putting any blame on my parents at all. I mean, they are humans and they did the best they could with the skills they had at the time. But they divorced when I was 11, and my father really hasn't been a part or present in my life since. So I had a lot of what my friend and therapist friend Christian Jackson, also called the daddy issues expert, she would say I had a ton of daddy issues, which I did. And they affected how I acted in relationships. So attachment and abandonment issues were always lurking in the shadows of my relationships up until I started therapy in my late 20s. But the great news is that therapy really, really opened my eyes to my thoughts, feelings, and actions. And I was able to learn new ways of thinking, being, and doing in this world and in relationships. And from that experience, I actually decided I wanted to help others do the same. And so I went back to school to become a therapist in my early 30s. So, due to my schedule, I'm unable to take therapy clients at this time. And that's why I've partnered with BetterHelp Online Counseling. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed mental health provider in your area who can help you via video calls, text messaging, as well as phone calls. And the best part is that it's very affordable. Plans start around $65 a week, and you can get 10% off your first month when you click on the link in the show notes. BetterHelp is a sponsor of the podcast, and they help make it possible for me to produce content, professionally edit the show, and spread the word about mental and emotional health topics. If you're wanting to work with someone face-to-face, there are many online directories out there that can match you with a licensed mental health provider. I usually refer people to Psychology Today. So see the show notes for links to get more information about BetterHelp as well as Psychology Today. So the next time I went to therapy was after the birth of our first daughter, which she was born in 2008. So right around then, I was dealing with stress and a ton of overwhelm, and some of my childhood stuff was starting to come back up for me. And my therapist at the time helped me in different ways than my first therapist. She helped me learn how to ask for help and support. I had a really hard time asking for help and support, like really, really hard time. And I was dealing with some anxiety, and of course my self-care was totally on the back burner. So that therapist, she was great. She recognized what was going on pretty quickly. And I think having an experience being in therapy and of course being a therapist, I was already like bought into the process. I kind of knew what was going on and I just needed somebody to guide me down exploring some of the stuff from my childhood that was showing up in my parenting or my being a mom. Okay. And then I went back to a therapy again about 4 or 5 years ago. This is pre pandemic. I was dealing with a lot of burnout in my work, a ton of burnout. And my therapist at that time, she helped me with boundary setting. She helped me with keeping my values and priorities front and center. She helped me with keeping my eye on starting something new and different. This was before starting. I think I had just started the podcast and she kind of helped me see the vision for the podcast as well. So that was a great experience. And then I've also worked with a life coach when I turned 40. So that's different than therapy. So my life coach really helped me focus on setting goals and taking action on some things that I was kicking around in my early 40s. I was also going through, I guess you could call a midlife crisis of some sort, and he really helped me identify my priorities and values. And really at that point in my life, he really helped me kind of make a plan for maybe pivoting my skill set a little bit and looking for new opportunities to use my skills. So you could say for the past 10 years, I have been working on, from burnout to new possibilities and opportunities, expanding my skill set. This has been a journey for me for sure. And gosh, just kind of thinking about all the different therapists and therapies I've done over the years, it's kind of cool. And I can say, in my case, when I go back to therapy, it's usually I don't need to be there as long as I was in it the very first time. The first time I was in therapy, I mean, it was months and months because I was kicking around things I had never kicked around before. Now I know what my stuff is. I can identify it when it starts to bubble up, present day at, 49 years old, and as a therapist and as a mom, as a wife, as a podcaster, as a business owner, like all the things. So they've taught me, these therapists over the years have taught me skills. They've taught me coping mechanisms. And I keep myself accountable to what I've learned. I mean, my husband, he's aware of my stuff and he helps kind of hold the mirror up to me when I'm maybe out of alignment in my values and my priorities, kind of taking me back to, the things that I told myself in my late 20s that moving forward, I was going to live my life differently. And so it's been a journey, y'all. It's been a process. And so, yeah, that's a long story of me going to therapy. Yes, I've been to therapy and I would go back in a heartbeat when needed. So, I've just answered 2 listener questions and that was really fun. So if you have questions for me, feel free to send me an email, lisa@lisamustard.com. You can also be sure to follow me on Instagram to keep an eye out for my call and my stories for if you have questions. I'm happy to answer anything around therapy, around mental health. If you have questions about a certain mental health illness, or maybe you have questions about why you're doing something in relationship or why at your work, you're feeling a certain way, like we can come up with answers as well as maybe hypothesize what might be going on. And while I'm not taking on new clients, I can definitely recommend you to check out the resources in the show notes so that you can maybe find a therapist and get working because therapy is a wonderful gift for yourself. So thanks for tuning in this week, you guys. I hope you have a great weekend and I'll talk to you soon. The Therapy Show with Lisa Mustard and the information provided by me is solely intended for informational and entertainment purposes and is not a substitute for advice, diagnosis, or treatment regarding medical or mental health conditions. Although I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, the views expressed on this podcast, my website, or any related content should not be taken for medical or psychiatric advice. Always consult your physician before making any decisions related to your physical or mental health. Hey guys, before we end this episode, if you are liking my content, if you're liking my podcast, be sure to go over and leave me a 5-star review on the podcast platform of your choice. And if you are up for it, I'd love it if you left me a review as well. Well, that wraps up another episode of The Therapy Show with Lisa Mustard. I know there are hundreds of thousands of podcasts out there, and I'm thankful you've chosen to listen to mine.
Be sure to visit lisamuster.com to access the show notes and discover more fantastic content.
And I'd be grateful if you subscribe to the show. Thank you.